Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today. Got a big one for you. We're going to talk about the manipulation of little minds via the TV. But first, before I get started, torrential downpours sent muddy water racing through streets in Libya, Greece, and Spain, and flooded parts of Hong Kong and New York City. Thousands of people died in the city of Dern, Libya. Zagora, Greece, saw a record of 30 inches of rain, the equivalent of a year and a half of rain falling in 24 hours. A few weeks earlier, monsoon rains triggered deadly landslides and flooding in the Himalayas that killed dozens of people in India. After severe flooding on almost every continent this year, including mudslides and flooding in California in early 2023, and devastating floods in Vermont and New York in July, it can seem like extreme rainfall is becoming more common. Yeah, kind of can seem that way, doesn't it? All they keep saying is, look at all this rain. This is because it's global warming. So what role does global warming play in all of this? Well, do you have a plane? Can you make the rain? Can you make the rain in Spain fall on the plains? Damage caused by floods are immediate. Lives are lost, properties are destroyed, and if rural areas are hit, crops are destroyed. Flooding causes severe damage, disrupts economic processes, and causes a food shortage. Consequences of flooding on property value will cause areas who continue to have flooding problems to have a decrease in real estate value. Yeah, they're just going to flood the land out until they get the people out of it, and then they can grab up the land, right? Rinse and repeat. So, decrease in property value. Imagine that. After last week's event, questions were raised whether cloud seeding, a process that the UAE frequently conducts, could have caused the heavy rains. Cloud seeding is a process in which chemicals are implanted into clouds to increase rainfall in an environment where water scarcity is a concern. So instead of moving to places that has water, you build in the desert and seed the clouds. The UAE is located in one of the hottest and driest regions on Earth, has been leading the effort to seed clouds and increase precipitation. So, big surprise, right? Flooding all over the place. Same issues, right? Get rid of the food, get rid of the people, and grab up the land. Rinse and repeat. Israeli military officials are now going public with criticisms that the war in Gaza has been misguided for a simple reason. Besides revenge, the war never had a clear political strategy or objective. This lack of a political approach reflects long-standing attitudes in Israel's society that have now trapped the country in a forever war with the Palestinians and their other neighbors, with the U.S. as its patron, effectively pulling along for the ride. The roots of this failure have been years in the making. The war has not only tarnished America's reputation abroad, well, actually, I think this war has been very illuminating for people. Even the kids are noticing that America is an aggressive, militaristic society. We are not what people think we are here. So they say the war has not only tarnished America's reputation abroad, but it also increasingly is tearing at its own social fabric. Even die-hard subscribers to the U.S. foreign policy consensus have been forced to reckon with the failures of treating the Palestinians as politically irrelevant. In a recent interview with Politico, the top U.S. murderer who has killed more than anybody, Victoria Nuland, acknowledged that this approach has laid the groundwork for the present calamity. And if Victoria Nuland is calling this out, that woman speaks and blood shoots out of her teeth. So if that woman thinks this has gone too far, boy, has it gone too far. She would murder to get a promotion with the drop of a hat. And she went on to say, beginning with the Trump administration, everybody fell in love with regional normalization as a cure-all for the instability and grievances and insecurity in the Middle East, Newland said. But if you leave out the Palestinian issue, then someone is going to seize it and run with it, and that's what Hamas did. But everyone is lying about Hamas. Everybody on social media is blaming Hamas on Israel. Get your facts straight. This is a battle of omission. All of their top agents on social media claim they are not the MSM. If they say that word one more time, I may have to just punch them in the face, okay? Every show these people have, well, I'm not mainstream media, as they sit there and read mainstream media articles. Yeah, sure they're not. They're just an extension of it all, right? They have all been pitching this idea that Israel created Hamas. Israel does not make a move without the alliance and full support financially with the United States. It does not happen on its own. It's not widely known that Hamas owes its existence to Israel and the United States. These two allies played a significant role in the formation and creation of this terror group, along with all other terror groups originate here in the United States. Get your facts straight. And when you hear the facts being told wrong, straighten them out. Stop blaming other countries. Back in the 1970s, the U.S. and Israel took a fringe group of Palestinian Islamists and transformed them into one of the world's most notorious and deadly terror organizations ever. Did you hear that word? Back in the 1970s, the United States and Israel took a fringe group of Palestinian Islamists and transformed them into one of the world's most notorious and deadly terror organizations ever. All of these terror organizations are really the United States. Psychopaths in many ways, due to poor organizational skills, drug and alcohol use, are now a bunch of toothless tigers. What is a toothless tiger? A toothless tiger is an empty threat or an aggressive but harmless person. I have talked about the United States being a paper tiger in the past, but I am here to say the United States of America is, in fact, a toothless tiger. They rely on lies and deception. A toothless tiger is an empty threat or an aggressive but harmless person. The expression dates in this sense from the mid-20th century and means the same thing as a paper tiger. Whoever coined this phrase obviously forgot that toothless tigers still have claws. Granted, the National Human Rights Commission is a toothless tiger, but can't it even growl? You will hear this word toothless tiger used quite a bit. So they're asking, can the National Human Rights Commission, which is in fact a toothless tiger, but can't it even growl? Complaints about lack of resources and indifference to its recommendations are justified, but has it made full use of the powers it already has? Hearing a petition on extrajudicial killings in Manipur last month, the Supreme Court noted that the National Human Rights Commission, the protector, advisor, monitor, and educator of human rights, had referred to itself as a toothless tiger, an abject admission of the statutory body's helplessness and failure. This is the plan, not the bug in the system. The dismal state of the commission is well known. It receives as many as 450 complaints a day, but lacks trained staff. Its communications and guidelines are disregarded. The few compliance reports it receives from state governments are of poor quality, often illegible and incomplete. It cannot directly investigate complaints of violation by the armed forces. It can only seek reports from the central government and make recommendations, which then, of course, everybody then refuses to acknowledge, right? That is how the entire trick works. So before we get to the subject today, kids staring at devices, I'm actually much more alarmed than I thought I would be about kids on devices. I'm actually horrified, would be a more accurate word to describe my emotions about kids on devices. I discovered a lot of things that were only things that I kind of had on my mind that may be going with kids staring at devices. All of my worst fears have been confirmed. Children do not belong on devices. So before I get started, I have two articles about how the United States created Hamas. I have an article about cartoon effects in changing children's mental response and behavior. I found some fabulous studies. One of them has to do with when they get their first smartphones and their mental well-being outcomes. Truly terrifying information, at least to me it is. Have smartphones created an anxious generation? U.S. teens use screen more than 7 hours a day on average. Why do children want to become YouTubers when they grow up? For the U.S. military, video games get serious. And I have a link to a young person called Elle Palmer. I have followed Elle for a number of years. She is one of the first kids who came out after being transgendered and decided it was a bad idea. Elle is well, she makes me very sad, okay? Because I watched her for these years go through all of this. How did Elle get started out? Well, she got started out by watching pornography in her room as a young child. So if you want to explore the implications, then head on over to her channel and listen to her talk. You will see wild mood swings in between when she uploads a video. She has this look of complete sadness on her face. They have her on massive amounts of pills. She may have escaped the transgender business, but she hasn't gotten out of the woods yet because they have her loaded up on all those medications. I became very concerned several years ago, and that's why I'm always harping about these kids and medication, because these kids sit around chat rooms and they talk about medications. They talk about dosage. They talk about amounts. I mean, it really frightens me because when we were kids, we were out playing, okay? We weren't in chat rooms alone in our rooms talking about medications, okay? So that whole thing with these kids and meds really sets me on edge for this reason. All of these kids are basically being put on the same medications they had me on. It took 15 years for them to collapse my immune system, and I started off with a very healthy autoimmune system. I was not subjected to junk food and all of that. I was not subjected to vaccines, and it took 15 years for them to crash out my entire system. These kids on those pills do not have a chance, and that is the goal. So let me get going on today's subject. So I found some interesting articles. The Israelis are their own worst enemy when it comes to fighting terrorism. They are like a guy who sets fire to his hair and then tries to put it out, hitting it with a hammer. They do more to incite and sustain terrorism than curb it. So, in the decades before 9/11, hardcore activists and organizations among Muslim fundamentalists on the far right were often viewed as allies for two reasons. Because they were seen as a fierce anti-communist league, and because they opposed secular nations such as Egypt's Nasser and Iran's Mossadi. So, yeah, in Syria, the United States, Israel, and Jordan supported the Muslim Brotherhood as a civil war against Syria. and Israel quietly backed Ahem Yassim and the Muslim Brotherhood in the West Bank, leading to the establishment of Hamas. When people start telling you one thing repetitively, you have to wonder why. The reason why is because they're trying to trick us. They are trying to minimize the U.S.'s role. So let's get to the subject of today. All kinds of issues with kids staring at devices. It actually bends their minds. When I was a kid, back in the old days, we didn't have repetitive TV. If the show was on, it was on. We didn't have repeats. We didn't have cable. We didn't have video. I would have been 6 or so when we got our first TV. But then my dad was stationed in Spain, so from the age of 9 to 12, I had no access to TV. So what's going on with kids today? Well, in these articles I'll be talking to you about, I'd like to put out a disclaimer before I get started. A lot of things have happened that had we were able to make better choices, we would have changed things. That is why we're here on the game board, to learn and to grow, not to ruminate over every little thing that you perceive as a bad move. Sitting around right now and ruminating over bad things will not make much progress. That's why overexposure to therapy, in my opinion, can be harmful when every week they ask you to retell that event over and over and over again. You don't really get a chance to move past that event because you're ruminating about it. You're mulling it over in your mind. And now would be a very easy time for all of us. None of us are perfect. If we were perfect, you would not be here. This is for people who are learning. So we are making a lot of mistakes along the way. Use this as an opportunity to move forward, not backwards. If you see yourself ruminating over things that you may or may not have allowed your own children to do, acknowledge it, think about it, and move along. Keep moving forward. It is good to look at the past, but it's not good to ruminate about the past to the point that you become unable to actually function. So kids now are actually going blind. They're locked up inside. They're shut off from fresh air and the sun. If they go outside, they now slap on sunscreen. Imagine if someone offered you the opportunity to have your 10-year-old child grow up on Mars. Even though there is every reason to believe that the radiation and low gravity on Mars would greatly disrupt healthy adolescent development, leading to long-term afflictions. Surely, given the risk, you would refuse the offer. A decade ago, parents could not have known the threats lying within the shiny new smartphones they presented to their exciting teenagers. But the evidence is mounting that the children who grew up with smartphones are struggling. And before I forget it, on my website, somebody has been gathering all the known studies having to do with smartphones. And if you click on the link that I have for smart meters, scroll down to the bottom, and I have posted all of these studies. So if you're thinking, my kid's not getting hurt, do your own research. This is not a matter of listening to me for an hour and then just wandering off for the rest of your day. Looky for yourself. I am not anybody's seeing eye dog. I am as imperfect as anybody. Do your own research. You do not need a seeing eye dog. You can do this. So a decade ago, parents could not have known the threats lying with the new shiny smartphones. And another thing, these articles are not talking about the exposure to the radiation, which I consider as deadly or worse than the rest of this stuff. So by omission, we're not going to be talking about the actual effects of the radiation. And I got to tell you, being in a home with radiation, it is a heck of a ride as far as how your moods go. I can't imagine a young preteen having this electricity and radiation going on and still trying to cope with society. So the kids who grew up with smartphones are struggling. This author said the period from 2010 to 2015 was the great rewiring. This was a period when adolescents had their neural systems primed for anxiety and depression by extensive daily smartphone use. This person's two central claims are that Gen Z is suffering from a major mental illness epidemic and that smartphones are largely to blame. Readers should be wary about both these claims, not in the sense that we should resist believing them, but we should not be too eager to embrace them. After all, it is perilous easy to believe that the kids aren't all right. Elders routinely despair of the younger generation. Smartphones did not initially raise major developmental concerns for children. The problem started around 2010 when they combined with other factors like social media, high-speed internet, a backward-facing camera encouraging selfies, addictive games, easily accessible pornography, and free apps that maximize profit by cultivating addiction and social contagion. This toxic technological mix allowed smartphones to take over children's lives. Usage rates averaging 7 hours a day gradually but profoundly rewired their maturing brains. Haidt thinks that rewiring gives rise to 4 fundamental concerns. 1. Social deprivation. A smartphone is an experience blocker, taking up hours a day that would otherwise be spent in physical play or in-person conversations with family and friends. 2. Sleep deprivation. Many teenagers stay on their smartphones late at night when they need rest. Number 3, attention fragmentation. Alerts and messages continually drag teenagers away from the present moment and tasks requiring concentration. 4, addiction. Apps and social media are deliberately designed to hack vulnerabilities in teenager psychologies, leading to an inability to enjoy anything else. And say what you want about the parents from my generation. We knew our boundaries with our parents, okay? It was extremely clear to us how we were to behave when we were in public. It was extremely clear to us that we were meant to wash our hands and sit down in an orderly way and eat our dinner with our elbows not on the table. It was also extremely clear to us when bedtime was. There was no escaping bedtime. You went to bed at a regular hour, and that was it. There was no arguing over if you went to bed or not. That did not happen. Parents retained more authority over us. Was it all good? Not really. I mean, my parents had very few guardrails on us. Very few. They did things that, well, I probably wouldn't do them if I had kids. Like when my father was stationed in Spain, that movie that I said that we liked so much, How the West Was Won, we loved that movie. We went into Madrid, and remember, we lived on base housing about half an hour from Madrid. We were little children, 9 years old. After dinner, when it's getting dark out, we would hop on the bus, just us kids, head into Madrid, watch the movie, wander around for a while, and then eventually hop on the bus and head home. I think that was probably a bridge too far. I'm not sure it was good to have us little kids walking around Madrid on our own, but we did not have guardrails. And I honestly thank my parents for that because it made me a fairly independent person because we would be out playing for the entire day. So we had to manage ourselves, we had to manage our time. And for all things we did during that day, we had to get home in time for dinner. And if it was summertime and we were good kids, we would get to go back outside again and play some more until it was dark. So, no, we were not sitting around watching TV. My mom used a very clever trick on us. If we were hanging around the house, let's say on a Saturday, and we were watching cartoons, she would just very casually say something like, "Oh, it's good you kids want to enjoy the cartoons today because later on I'm going to have some chores I want you to help me with." Well, within a minute, we were out that door. The minute we heard if we stuck around, we had to do chores. But what I'm trying to say is they had boundaries about how we behave, whether they were right or wrong. It was clear that every kid in that neighborhood knew when it got time for dinner, we all dropped what we were doing and we went home. That is called having boundaries with children. Parents did not try to make us their best friends. They just didn't do it that way. So what happens is this. What happens is that I'll keep reading from this thing because girls proved more vulnerable to the damaging effects on social media, while boys retreated into online gaming and pornography. Ruminating over small things, body images, repeat over and over, same plan with therapy, keep them locked into a cycle. And then being kids, they don't understand necessarily the algorithms when they first start off on YouTube. So what I heard from these kids time and time again, they start to check out their sexuality online. Well, then the algorithm kick in, and then before you know it, the kids get all these shows about transgenders and being gay and all this stuff. So the kid honestly thinks, well, I don't know. All of a sudden, I'm seeing all these things about gay and transgenders. Maybe that's what I am. And kids seek attention. They're locked away in their rooms on devices. They get a way to get your attention by telling you they're transgender. If your kid walks into the room and announces they're transgender and you are surprised, we have not been paying close enough attention. Nobody noticed when the kids came home after visiting with the priest that they seemed rather odd. Nobody notices these things. So this person went on to explain that normally for almost all of human and evolution, these incentives drove teenagers to do things in person, in the real world. Things like making friends, playing games together, navigating disputes, getting tasks done, developing romantic attachments, and taking physical risks. That is what kids are supposed to do. While these activities can lead to injuries, tears, and frustrations, they are nevertheless important for teenagers' mental health and development. Children are what they call anti-fragile. They need these types of risks and stressors to grow up properly. Smartphones and their apps, games, and social media also provide responses to all these drivers, but they do so without prompting the above activities and the important outcomes they deliver, such as close friendships and resilience. For example, a teenager might feel lonely and want connection, so they join Instagram or TikTok. Social media provides a type of connection and delivers a temporary dopamine hit, but it fulfills the teenager's immediate need in a way that does not involve real-world connections and challenges. This only makes them lonelier and more isolated in the long term. I found a very good study about cartoons. Actually, it was a good and a horrifying study. Cartoon time in our children's schedules. In a research performed by the researcher Kyla Boyce at Michigan University, they summed up the cartoon content in our children's schedule as follows. 2 to 5-year-old children watch cartoons 32 hours a week. Two to 5-year-olds watch cartoons 32 hours a week. 6 to 11-year-old children watch cartoons 28 hours a week. And they also stated that 71% of the 8 to 18-year-olds had a TV in their room. 53% of 7 to 12-year-olds had no parental monitoring for what's being watched on TV. 51% of homes, TV is switched on most of the time. Another research performed concluded most parents prefer to leave their children in front of TV in order to finish their work or to have a rest. Putting a child in front of the TV is the best way for a parent to make their child eat their food. I would have to say that putting children in front of TVs to eat their food breaks their association with food and turns them into horrible eaters, but I'll keep reading. How does child's brain develop and work? In a research published on UNICEF's official website, it says that there are 3 factors in child brain development worldwide. 1, there are strong relations between the genes and the brain development. However, the surrounding experience is what sculptures how the brain will function. 2, thinking and imagination are of the most factors that affect the functionality of the brain till the age of 12. 3, early mind setting is the secret. Once done, children's pattern of future actions could be predicted. He concluded how human brains grow and work in early stages. It was once believed that the brain's development was predetermined through genes and that its growth followed an already determined path. Modern research proves that experiences at early ages has an effect on the development of the brain and affects the way which the internal circuits of the brain become connected to each other, which means that the baby's brain is still under development. This person said a child's brain is like a house that has just been built. The walls are up, the doors are hung. Then you go to the store and buy electrical wiring, switches, a fuse box, and other electrical supplies. You bring these supplies to the new house and you set them on the floor. Will they work? Probably not. You first must string the wiring and hook up all the connections. This is quite similar to the way our brains are formed. The nerve brain cells that an individual is born are as much as 10 times the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So the nerve brain cells that we're born with are 10 times the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, or 20 times the number of people on Earth. Despite that, we will not grow any more than these. But till the day of birth, these cells are still not connected together nor forming a link. So if you look at the articles I have, there's a lot of interesting graphs about how these neurons work in the brains at different levels. These connections that are formed by the brain create our habits, our way of thinking, memories, and mind. At the age of 3, a toddler's brain would have created about 1,000 trillion synapses, which is nearly double what he would have when he grows to be an adult. The connections that are created in a children's brain are either strengthened by repeating experience or weakened by not being used. Starting at the age of 11, kids start losing the connections that are not used. The ones that are enforced through repeated experiences does affect the child's brain structure and sculpture his way of thinking. From the facts above, we conclude that the first experience has its mandatory stamp in the children's brain structure and consequently the child's way of thinking and behavior. Any experience, however less frequent, it still has its effect on the brain structure. However, repeated actions till the age of 12 are highly effective and leave their lifetime effect. Experience to the child is what he watches with his eyes, hears with his ears, and lives through his feelings. Concluding that the above 3 factors and the fact that until the age of 12, a child would have watched 18,000 hours of cartoon. This means that the cartoon is one of the main factors that sculpture the human brain, resulting in a predetermined set of way of thinking and behavior. How are children affected with cartoons? Why and to what extent? Which is better and more relevant that the child would learn from? Academic books and a teacher, or from an animated TV series? In the research in Michigan University performed, she said that children are attracted to the cartoon content much more than the academic traditional ways of learning due to the well-written scenarios, audio and visual effects, and colors. These factors are enough to cause the child to absorb information dozens better than that absorbed from a teacher in a classroom. Child's brain at an early age always seeks new experiences. That is why what is delivered in cartoons get toddlers glued to their chairs while watching animated series. A well-written scenario, right audio and visual effects, and a decent-looking character are the main factors for the child to get stuck for the cartoon hero, and enough for his brain to begin automatically following his path and trying to be a copycat, even for the finest details, including ways of speaking, thinking, body language, and even the way of dressing up. These are the factors that traditional schools lack in delivering the academic content, even when a teacher tries to explain a part that children fail to understand. He uses facial expressions, acting, and vocal effects for the children to imagine the content. In animated series, these are the backbones of the show. That is why children chases their best TV series among channels and can sit for long hours watching TV, easily absorbing the included content. Not even among the child, you can imagine watching a documentary with an academic content on National Geographic Channel. You can easily recall these scenes and these situations that you have watched, much better than a situation that was told with no visual or vocal effects. Consequently, children who watch educational programming are more likely to have higher grades, read more books, place greater value on achievement, and show more creativity than children who watch more violent or purely entertainment television. So while children are watching cartoons, there is a form of learning process that is going on. Whatever children learn while watching cartoons, they tend to act out, thereby influencing their mode of socializing with other children and with the world in general. Children's cartoons effects in changing children mental response and behavior. Factors that sculpture children's way of thinking are found most easily in the environment where they grow up. These include daily events, memorable experiences, and peak feelings. Cartoons are one of the daily habits for our children. Studies have proven that an average child with a faculty of a TV and a satellite connection at his home watches approximately 18,000 hours of television from kindergarten to high school graduation. How does this experience affect our children's minds? What types of content are delivered to our kids in a cartoonish show? Are all shows trustable, or shall parents pay monitoring attention to the TV shows? Cartoons have been a part of cinema history from the time the first motion pictures were made in the late 1800s. A cartoon is a movie made by using animation instead of live actors, especially in a humorous film intended for children. Cartoons can be described as the making of movies by filming a sequence of slightly varying draws or models so that they appear to move and change when the sequence is shown. These are the elements that keep viewers, mostly children, glued to their seats. Cartoons were initially so short because people would be watching these shorts in the movie theater before their feature film. When cartoonists could put their shows on TV, they began to get longer, creating the half-hour block shows that are on Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and the Disney Channel today. Also, the cartoons had to become more family-friendly, so more people would watch their shows. So, they did a lot of research, and this is, I don't know why I have this twice, but anyway, so I think they're finding out a lot about kids and their brain, the synapses, and they're just now finding this out. But did they know this before? And that's why they created cartoons? Probably likely. They likely figured out that if they do a well-written script with a bunch of crazy looking characters, they could get cartoons, they could get kids to watch them. And it's more attractive than a teacher just standing up there at a chalkboard going, okay, kids, today we're going to talk about history now. If you don't fall asleep, I'm going to tell you all this stuff. Oh, wait a minute. It's time for lunch. So, yeah, based on what kids are being taught in the classroom, of course, cartoons would be much more attractive. It's like looking at a boring medical literature versus a dynamic explanation of how it all works, right? So there's a lot to these studies. I hope that you will pay attention to these studies and dig into them. I'm not going to read every line of every study. So there's a lot in here. Uh, so some of the people, it shows that 80% children have been affected psychologically after watching cartoons. It shows that 60% of children behave differently after watching cartoons. Do children change their spoken language or accent after watching the cartoon? It shows that 60% of the children are changed their language and accent after watching cartoons. That is because children get affected with the cartoon character and start copycatting them in every possible way, including the way of speaking. They show that 60% of the children's behavior changed after watching cartoons as they start fighting with each other, using the same skills and techniques applied by the cartoon characters. Do children prefer watching cartoons to outdoor games? 60% of the children prefer watching cartoons to outdoor games. This means that the entertainment gained by the cartoon is much higher than the physical entertainment the children enjoy from outdoors playing or going to a picnic. The conductors of the experiment concluded that cartoon TV series has great influence over the children. A cartoon has a major portion of the child's attention and time more than any other activity the child performs. In modern life, where the parents are busy with their work, much less portion of their time is given to their children. Well, that's because they introduce the concept of money. So before you start feeling bad about, I didn't spend enough time with my children, these are all true feelings. Don't avoid your true feelings, but also put in a slice of reality. We were forced to go out and work. Women were forced into the work field. They didn't know why. They thought it was to become liberated. And the fact was they were becoming slaves to the system and taxable. Women became taxable, so that's why they wanted women out in the workforce and minimum wage employees taking care of these children. So you get a whole society of kids. Now, in the 50s, when I was raised, all the kids in the neighborhood, all of our moms were at home. No one had moms that worked outside of the home. So you get all these kids, and now instead of having them go outside and play all day long, I think it was this fear of stranger danger that took over. Because remember, about this time, they started pushing this idea that all kids are going to get abducted off the streets. Well, did some of them get abducted? Well, sure they did. But most kids are getting abducted and raped and murdered by people they already know. So the whole stranger danger thing, and this is my opinion, remember, I had a very different background than likely any of you did. I bet none of you were running around downtown Madrid at 9 years old with your little friends. So I can say that I find very little bad to say about how I was raised because we may have been put at a little bit more risk, but we were pretty sharp little kids. We saw people doing things when we were out and about. A couple of times we saw men masturbating. Did we run home? No, we left the area. We were wise little kids. We did not need to run home to mom or dad. We knew to run in the opposite direction. We got out of the way of danger. And we learned that because we were turned loose as little kids. Maybe a little bit too loose, but it worked, okay? So I'm certainly not reminiscing about the good old days, but I can say that behavioral wise, actually being not forced, but allowed to be independent brings about a lot of skills. And speaking about the skills, a positive cartoon content could teach a toddler how to become a leader, how to analyze problems in a scientific manner, how to manage a risk, think about acting, and a thing the kid might to love. But the experience, life experience is what kids learn by. Otherwise, you're removing their life experience and giving them the experience that a bunch of psychopaths have cooked up and put on the TV for your kid to watch. That is the basic reality. If you put your kids in front of a device, you need to understand that you are responsible. And you also need to understand that you are putting your child into the hands of psychopaths. And if you're okay with all those decisions, then okay. But start making decisions based on information. Maybe you can find some cartoon that you could use as a treat to teach your child something. Watch it with them. Stop letting them watch it alone, is what I'm saying. Because there's some negative effects. A cartoon could be much more dangerous than any other experience a child could witness before the age of 12. It could contain content that would confuse the child with what he experiences in real life. It could contain directions that contradict with the parents' orders. A flawed cartoon could lead a child to have a different, undesirable point of view of his parents, his friends, teacher, and even his relationships in general. Negative content on purpose or mismanaged could lead a child to doubt his raising, his skills, his way of thinking, lifestyle that he grew up according to whatever his parents had taught him. A character with negative attitude and manners that appear on the screen as a hero could illustrate the child to vice versa his understandings of his life and surroundings. And all the time they're sculpturing his acts in an aggressive or overacting manner to situations. So they're finding a lot of things. This is no longer just guesswork. One of the most undesirable factors that could be present in a cartoon show is the presence of sexual content. How this could be present in an animated series, and what are the side effects? Let's have a quick review on the human brain. The human brain is divided into two main parts. One is the conscious mind, simply called the human brain. This is the part of the brain which you are currently using to read or listen to this sentence. This part is responsible for analyzing, calculating, and logical thinking, and this part is specialized for human rather than other living organisms. The other part is the unconscious, called the animal brain. It is named so because it is a common brain part between humans and animals. This part is responsible for a number of purposes. Two of these purposes are, first is the memory, and the second purpose is maintaining the actions and habits that guarantee the continuation of the species without being exposed to extinction. These actions are mainly sex and food. That is why these two actions, sex and food, provides a human body with top joy. This joy is felt through the production of special chemicals. This occurs due to the chemical process that takes place inside the brain, called dopamine. So what are the entry methods to the brain? Human brain would analyze incoming data from all senses of the body. This includes visuals seen by the eye and audio heard by the ears. This data is transferred through canals from the eye and the ear to the human brain through electrical pulses passing among the neurons. Once this data contains sexual content, the animal brain would be triggered, causing that special chemical process would take place, and the hormones that cause joy to human body are produced. So, never knew this before. That's why we keep looking, right? I knew nothing about what I'm telling you today except a generalized idea. That is why I do what I do, because I do not know. So I look. Looking is how we find out things. Looky, looky. So this pokes another question. What are the sexual content that, if witnessed by the human eye, would trigger those chemical reactions? By nature, the animal brain of each human gender is attracted to the autonomy and organs of the other gender. So in case of a human male, he is attracted to body features that is present in a female human body, including non-flattened chest, curved thighs, buttocks, and the reproductive organ. While in case of a female human, the animal brain is naturally attracted to body and facial hair, stretched muscles, and the reproductive organ. In cases these parts are witnessed by the eye in a seductive way, this would trigger chemical reactions to take place. And remember that very first movie they produced, that Alice movie, she was seductively looking at the cartoonist. She was touching her crotch and doing all of these things. This is the plan, not the bug in the system, okay? This is not an accident. Another factor about the human brain is that it does not differentiate between what is virtual and what is real. In other words, if a scene is witnessed on TV, the human brain will react to it as if it was real. And this makes a great deal of sense. Have you ever heard people talk about celebrities? They talk about them like they're their best friends. They talk about them like they just left having dinner with them, in a very personal way. When people talk in personal ways like my jeweler or my doctor, I just refer to the doctor. I've never called him my doctor. When you start to see those familiar things spread into here, so the human brain does not differentiate. This explains why we feel hungry when we see a sandwich ad on TV, why we feel afraid while watching a frightening scene, and why we human males are poked when a man sees a beautiful, seductive girl on the screen. Although our conscious human brain does realize that this is just a picture and what he sees is just electronic display, our unconscious mind does not analyze this signal this way. Instead, it begins to react to what it has just witnessed as if it had seen a real girl. Adding these two pieces of information together, when a male human eye witnesses a girl on TV in an attractive position, the human brain will begin to react to the incoming information. It begins to give order to the rest of the body organs to be prepared for fertilization and be ready for having babies, and vice versa occurs with the female human. This is exactly how the human brain works in witnessing the other gender. How is this information involved in the cartoon show? Cartoon content recently had the characteristics of including attractive sexual content under the name of comedy and action. This entry has its side effects on the child's brains much more than the benefit of drawing a smile on their faces. Part of the modern cartoon comedy is a sexual comedy present in seduction and harassment. Directors focus on the human anatomy in order to produce his unique product or to improve level of comedy or action present in the show. This sexual content triggers early toddlers' minds to be attracted to the opposite gender autonomy. Several sexual content in the cartoon creates a psychological case called novelty. in which dopamine molecule of addiction is triggered and produced continuously without limitation. This leads to brain dysfunction as the fertilization process is always on alert and triggered several times in a short interval of time and from different entries. But this is just insane, right? So the sexual content triggers early toddlers' minds to be attracted to the opposite sex. But this molecule of addiction is triggered and produced continuously without limitations, which leads to brain dysfunction. So, yeah, that's pretty scary that dopamine gets released because the sexual acts in cartoons and continues spiraling around. Socioeconomic status makes a difference in screen time. Tweens from higher income homes were found to use nearly 2 hours less screen time per day than those from lower income households, and the difference among teens is similar. When you don't have a lot of resources in the home or a lot of resources to do things outside the home, you're going to spend more time with the resources that you have. It's an affordable, accessible source of informal learning and a form of entertainment. So, yeah, I'll just read you some key stats. So I got to close this off here. Let me tell you one thing about Africa that I found interesting. The study found African American teens enjoyed using social media more than their white and Hispanic and Latino counterparts. 51% enjoy it a lot compared to 37% of white teens and 43% of Hispanics. More than 29% of kids from the United States want to become YouTube vloggers. About 53% of U.S. parents say their kids under 11 watch YouTube daily. Has anybody but me wondered about all those photos from YouTube? What happens to them all? You know, there have been 2 cases that YouTube got into a big fight with New York Times. New York Times did 2 exposés about the fact that YouTube had set its algorithm to attract pedophiles. And that was a big turning point. Big turning point around YouTube land. Everybody cut and ran. All the big channels cut and ran. They stopped talking about it because they got to have that money. They care about the money. They don't give a damn about your kids, okay? They're part of the problem themselves. So, why do 52% of kids aged 6 to 17 want to become YouTubers? About 70% of kids are more connected to YouTube influencers than traditional celebrities. I have explored almost every dark alley of YouTube. Get your kids off YouTube. It is dangerous. So let me finish my thought about these YouTube use of child pornography. Well, they had a couple clampdowns, big clampdowns, where they were caught red-handed feeding the algorithm to feed the pictures of the kids to the pedophiles. What was going on was pedophiles were date stamping the videos. So, like, let's say your kid was doing gymnastics and you video cammed it and uploaded to video. Well, the pedophiles were watching it. And what they were doing is they would say, at 10 minutes, and then everybody would know at 10 minutes was where the crotch shot was. Okay. That is how filthy YouTube is. But my question is this: where do all of those pictures end up? Do they end up being sold to pedophiles who are now using your children's photos? Stop uploading your family's photos. Enjoy your time with your family. People sit there with their cameras. Is anybody enjoying anything? They're just sitting there snapping pictures. 63% of YouTube views come from smartphone devices. 39.4 increase in YouTube usage during the COVID-19 pandemic. So More kids I have found become trans after watching pornography. The girls and the boys both were watching pornography on YouTube. I know this for a fact because I followed some of these kids for years now. That is how they got started. They were alone in their rooms watching pornography. And then the girls didn't want to get beaten around by the boys in the gaming field. So they thought, well, if I become a boy, maybe things will be better for me. And no parent intervention. Their parents were shocked when they told them they were trans. But should they have been shocked? Let me start with some conclusions here, and then I got to close this file off. As a conclusion of all the research literature, cartoon is one of the strong factors that does affect an individual's childhood and takes considerable time away from the young toddler schedule. Cartoon is a double-edged weapon. It can ruin an individual's childhood through excessive exposure to sexual and violent content, or could aid in raising a balanced child with a proper mental state. Cartoons could act as a homeschool to teach a kid the life experience that is not gained from parents or from school due to faculties that is lacking in the normal academic. But they're never going to be spending money on doing effective visuals for the schoolroom. They're tearing down the schoolrooms right now. So if you're hearing that, oh yeah, change is on the way, you're not hearing correctly. They are right now tearing the schools down. Soon, children will not have schools to go to. I wish I could find that show that I did. I lost it. I did a show around very early when this whole thing got started. It would have been around first part of 2020. I basically logged on. It was only about a 2-minute show. I literally screamed into the microphone, get the children away from them. Take them out of school. Keep them safe. Get them away. Did anybody hear me? Did anybody hear me? I screamed for almost 2 minutes. Screamed, yelling, get them out of the schools. Why didn't I leave that show up? Well, because I decided that maybe, just maybe, I was using the wrong response, because I learned many years ago from working in marketing that it is impossible to persuade and antagonize at the same time. So what I was doing by screaming into the microphone to get your children out of school, I was causing antagonism. I was not presenting it in a way that most people would understand where I was coming from. So that is why I removed it. I will find it if somebody wants it. I'm not hiding anything. But I did remove it because it left a certain image that would not probably encourage people to want to listen to me, because I was screaming, I was demanding, and I was off my rocker. Because you have to understand, early 2020, everything in my brain that I had been harboring and thinking about just came full circle. I realized that everything I'd been seeing had been a lie. So it was at that moment that I unfortunately grabbed the microphone and started screaming. I don't know if I can find it, but if I can find it, I'll look for it, because, yeah, that was my position a few years ago. And had my position changed? Of course it hasn't. Get them out of school. Be safe out there, and goodbye for now. If you leave them in their hands, then don't let me hear you complaining about the results, okay? We can't have it both ways. You can't have them caring for the children and then also complaining that we're not happy with the outcome. Life does not work that way. We have all the answers. We could have taught our own children. Don't be intimidated by all this. These are lying people who are sodomites. Always remember that. Sodomites. They get thrill from the raping of children. You don't think they also get thrill from the fact that they're harming children's minds? You don't think they get hurt, they get a buzz out of all these kids becoming autistic for all these different reasons? All these kids that are deciding to become transgender, an alarming amount of them are also autistic children making these decisions. I will ask you one last time, where are the adults in all of this? We need to circle those wagons. Be safe out there, and goodbye for now.